A celebration of life for someone who was larger than life. You have to hold that celebration at a venue like Rockford's Coronado Theater. A huge crowd was on hand Sunday to pay their respects to Rockford musician Daniel McMahon. It was on his birthday, too. He would have been 42 years old. McMahon died in September after a brief battle with esophageal cancer. Dan was born and raised in Rockford, but his impact reached the Midwest and the entire nation. The 2001 Lutheran High School grad was a lead guitarist and founding member of Miles Nielsen and the Rusted Hearts. He also co-wrote and performed the musical score for the 2012 Academy Award-winning documentary Undefeated.
It's just a testament to how, involved and how much he was just important to people and how much he affected and touched people through music and just through life and, through connections. I mean, Dan will be missed and Dan will be everywhere moving forward. So Dan is Dan.